decade has passed since Flint's water source switch triggered one of America's worst environmental disasters. With over 100,000 exposed to lead, an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease, and justice still elusive, tonight we revisit the Flint water crisis 10 years later.
Good evening and welcome to the Flint Water Crisis Special 10 years later. I'm your host, Courtney Bennett. Exactly 10 years on this day, the city of Flint switched their water source from the Detroit River to the Flint River. At the push of a button, water started flowing through the city's old infrastructure to get water to people's homes. That untreated water became contaminated with lead when it corroded the pipes. During this hour-long broadcast, we revisit that pivotal moment in our history that shook our community to its core and shocked the nation. Tonight, we reflect on the past decade, the challenges faced, and the progress made so far. As the Flint water crisis unfolded before our very eyes, so too the unlikely political career of Dr. Karen Weaver. By profession, Weaver is a psychologist. She tells Mid-MichiganNow anchor Mike Woolfolk that by necessity, she became a politician, feeling the need to step in and stand up for the city's people when others were not.
It is certainly fair to say that the one person whose political career was defined by the Flint water crisis is former Mayor Karen Weaver. And I want to thank you for coming in to sort of reflect on this. We were both looking at this video wall here and saying 10 years later, hard to believe that it has been a decade.
Exactly.
The Flint water crisis beginnings predated my time here in this market, and they predated your time in politics.
Correct.
Did you, before all of this, ever consider a run for political office before the Flint water crisis happened?
Never. Never. I had never considered a run.
And what about what happened made you decide to do that?
You know what? I got involved in politics helping someone else. I volunteered and I started seeing what was going on in the city, in my home. And if you remember, our first issue was the price. Our rates had been raised illegally. We were under emergency manager, and so that was the water issue. And so that was how it all started. I got involved, and while I'm campaigning, other things start coming to light. You know, you start hearing people talk about there's something wrong with the water, there's bacteria in the water, there are reports about our water, and then, you know, we knew this switch was coming as well, because I'd heard about that and thinking, we can't possibly be switching to the Flint River.
You ran for office on the Flint water crisis situation, and you won.
Mm-hmm.
So you somewhat had a mandate to try to fix this.
I did.
What first made you think you could fix it? Because the damage really had already been done. And what did you hope to accomplish?
You know what? The damage had been done, but one of the things I knew was it had been kept quiet. This had been going on for 18 months. You think about it, by the time I got in office in November of 15, this had gone on for 18 months. And people kept saying, well, what can you do any differently? And I kept saying, I can use my voice, because the residents, we weren't getting information really about what was going on. I mean, we had to have activists out there helping us. We had to get in touch with Virginia Tech. That's what activists were doing. I said, and for us to have to go outside to find out about what's going on right here in our own community, somebody ought to be speaking up and talking about this, and it needed to be more than activists. And I'm not diminishing anything they did, because we wouldn't be where we were had they not been speaking up. We wouldn't be where we were had pastors and clergy not been speaking up. But we needed somebody in an elected seat to say, you need to pay attention to Flint, because we've got a problem that needs to be addressed. And one of the things I knew was, while Flint became a poster child for the water, I knew that other communities around this country were having water and infrastructure issues, but what separated Flint from those other places was ours was done to us by people that were supposed to protect and serve us, and then it was covered up. And so I thought, the power that I have will be my voice. And I remember telling people, I said, I'll let you know what's going on. I said, whether it's good news or bad news, it's our news, and it's how we make decisions, you know, about ourselves, about about our family and our community. I said, so if I'm in meetings and I hear them saying, this is what we're going to do, and I think we should do something differently, I'm going to say, here's what they're doing. I think we should do this. I said, but I'm going to let us know what's going on with us. I said, and I will be in front of the media every chance I get to talk about it.
You went as far as to declare a local state of emergency, which some people felt like you didn't have the power to do, but it really put the situation on the national map. People really started paying attention at that point.
Right, they sure did. And I didn't know what to expect, but I knew going in there were two things I was fighting for. And one was, I really wanted a disaster. But they say man-made is not a disaster. In my mind, it's still a disaster. But okay, I'll go for the emergency. So I wanted to declare an emergency and help get Flint the resources that we needed and deserved, and to return home rule. Those were the two things that I was working for immediately, was because I always believed, and I still believe, that the power is supposed to be given to who we elect to be our voice, and that had been taken from us. So those were the first two things on my agenda, were to declare an emergency and return home rule.
The pipe replacements, you got that program started. That was a proactive move to try to do something that would keep this from happening again.
Right.
You did not get to finish the project before the next election.
Right.
This city right now still has not completed the pipe replacements and is being held in contempt of court. What are your thoughts on that situation? Because it should have been completed. We were a year ahead of schedule. It makes no sense that those pipes have not been completed in all of this time. This is going on, well, it's been 10 years, but I've been out of office since 19. This is 4 years later, and we were 85 to 90% done, a year ahead of schedule, and it hasn't been completed. The city should be held in contempt, because this should not have happened. This should not have happened. The settlement is another bone of contention, I think, with you and several others in the city. There are people in the city, while this settlement now is going on probably 2 years in approval, they're still waiting on money, payment checks.
Exactly.
That you would argue aren't going to be enough anyway. Right. But they're still waiting. The lawyers have already been paid.
That's right. And isn't that a shame? That is that's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. And that was one of my concerns, even from the beginning, with the first administration that was in office, with Governor Snyder. One of the things, when we talked about what should be the financial payment to the residents of the city of Flint, I remember saying we needed to start at $1.5 billion. And him being very angry with me because I said it in a press conference, and they didn't expect me to say that, but that was the question I was asked. And I was asked to retract that statement, and I said no, because it wasn't like I'd made that number up. I had met with people to say, different experts in different areas to say what would be a good starting point. And I never backed off of $1.5 billion as a start.
More of Mike's conversation with former Mayor Karen Weaver coming up later in the show.